So hello and welcome to the latest edition of You Are My Boro, where myself and Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo are going to talk all things Middlesbrough. We're going to have a quick look back at Plymouth and a chat around some of the things to emerge from that game. A quick chat then about Michael Carrick's press conference and what's come out of that, and then a look ahead to this weekend's game, where Boro obviously take on Championship leaders Leicester City. Little bit of housekeeping before we start. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please like, comment, and subscribe. It's great to get all of your comments. We do them. We do try and reply and we raise them from when we can. If you're listening on one of the podcast platforms that we're on, then also like and again get in touch with us. Let us know what you think. Dom, you all right? You had a good week?
I have, yeah. I'm sound, mate. Sound recovered from that Plymouth trip. Great game.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to get a 3-3 draw, then you want to get a game on a trip like that, don't you?
I was going to say it made the trip worthwhile. How was the drive down and back? Okay.
It was sound, but I ballsed up my timings, for want of a better term. You know the service station you recommended?
Yes. Leicester, I think.
Yeah, I'd kind of got it into my head. It was probably like 45 minutes, an hour further down the road. So I'd not long had to stop. And I'm like, it's going to be wasted. So I ploughed on down.
Yeah. You've got to split them out, haven't you? You can't do, you can't do too early after the first one.
And then on the way back, I can't remember. I'm well aware I'm turning into a service station correspondent here, but I can't remember where it was I stopped just after midnight. But service stations are a queer old place at that time of night, aren't they? When all that's open is the Costa and the casino area. Or
there's an entire podcast going on late night service station stops. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of the strangest places in the world, like you say, in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
W.H. Smith open.
Yeah.
The casino, the petrol station bit where sometimes you can get in, but sometimes it's one of the hatches and you can't really ask for what you want, a cup of tea or coffee or whatever, because the woman's not really wanting to make you it when you're there at the hatch. Yeah.
So I stopped actually at one of those garages and it was at the hatch and I wanted some chocolate, but I didn't know I wanted it there in front of me to get my taste. So she says, "What do you want?" And I'm panicking on the spot, thinking, "Well, actually, I don't know. I can't remember. I think I opted for a Kit Kat chunky duo, but yeah. Anyway, made it back sound, and yeah, it was a belting game. 3-3.
It was a game, wasn't it? So, yeah, I mean, what? Now that the dust settled, that we won't talk about it too much, but is it a good point? Was it a chance missed for Boro? Was it, off the back of the Exeter win? Did it keep the momentum going? How do you reflect on it now, quickly?
I think it's definitely a chance missed, and Carrick said as much afterwards. For all that I thought Plymouth were good, one of the better teams I've seen this season, and a nice watch. They played some lovely stuff. Boro twice really had control and had dominant spells after going in front twice. So to throw it away, I feel like I've said this a few times this week, but we know Carrick prizes control, doesn't he? So to have it twice and throw it away, I think that will have irked him. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad point. No, I just think it's an opportunity really. Boro should have left there with a win.
It was kind of one of those up and down games, wasn't it? Where at certain points of the game, you probably would have taken the point, but then at other points of the game, you've got it won really, and you've let that slip. I mean, in terms of positives to emerge from it, Josh Coburn, getting the goals. I mean, is that he's played well? I think Josh, since he's come into the team, he's had to do a fair bit of donkey work up there by himself, but he probably needed the goals, didn't he? Just to kick him on, if you like, and get that confidence going through him, because every striker needs goals. And while you can say, yes, he's putting a real shift in, he's linking play, but ultimately he would have wanted to score those goals as well.
Yeah. I think he scored 1 in the season and maybe gone 5 or 6 without. And what you don't want to do, especially for a young lad, is let that turn into something and become a narrative, isn't it? That, Coburn desperately needs a goal. I don't think he's played like a striker. Sometimes I know we're tripping into cliche territory early here, as we always do, but sometimes you watch a striker and you can't help but think, like, he needs a goal. I don't think Coburn looked a player like that. But with Latte Lath having scored the winner at Exeter, the longer that had gone on, then you could understand if a clamour had built for Carrick to change. And we spoke to Josh afterwards, and he said exactly that, really, that he's thankful to Carrick for not taking what he described as the easy option. If your centre forward's not scoring and you've lost a league game, then many managers would have made a change there. But he got his goals, but I think it was his all-round performance at Plymouth. It was the best I've seen him play this season. Early on, he made a good run into the channel that got Boro on the front foot after what had been a tricky start. He crunched into a couple of challenges. And obviously, it was Plymouth who very nearly signed Coburn in the summer. And I talked to Stephen Schumacher about him afterwards, and he couldn't speak highly enough of Coburn, saying how he was desperate to sign him. He watched him in League One at length last season, loved him there, said you could see from basically how difficult he made life for Plymouth centre-halves last week, that what he can offer, and said that he thinks he's shown that he can lead the line for a team challenging at the top end of the Championship.
I mean, that was going to be my next point, really. I mean, it feels like at the minute that Josh Coburn is Boro's number one striker. The patterns of the games tend to be Coburn's playing for 60 minutes, 70 minutes, and then Latt's coming on for a kind of dart in the last 20 minutes or so. And in fairness to him, has looked very effective in that role, and clearly his pace helps him, make an impact in the latter stages of games. And in fairness to Latt, he's put in a couple of good performances in this Carabao Cup run, but it still feels very much like Josh Coburn is now Michael Carrick's go-to man, which necessarily look like for pretty much all the summer, let's be honest, when he was potentially out the door. So is Josh ready for that, do you think? Is he at a level where he can be the main striker for a team with aspirations of finishing in the top six? And B, even with that, do we still think that the signing of another striker is likely in January?
Well, I was just gonna spin it back to you and say I think as it stands now, Boro's priority going into January would be one more centre forward. We know they wanted one more in the summer. You're an injury away, really, from looking very short. You're an injury away from having one recognised centre forward. And if it was Coburn who got it, well, if it's Latte Lath that gets injured, you've got one centre forward who's in his first full season of Championship football. If it's Coburn that gets injured, you've got one centre forward who's still acclimatising to life in the Championship and to England. So it wouldn't surprise me. And going out and finding a Cameron Archer is clearly very difficult. But it wouldn't surprise me, even though Boro have clearly talked about moving away from the loan market. It wouldn't surprise me if a loan signing of a Premier League striker was an opportunity, was a possibility in January. Then I think that'd make sense. But I think Coburn is showing what I don't think Boro are desperate for a striker. I think Coburn is taking his chance, really. He would probably say himself he needs more goals between now and January. What you don't want now is another 5 or 6 games without a goal. But I think if you were to bring in a centre forward and then have Coburn, Latte Lath on one other, then that's a strong collective, really, going into the second half of the season. What do you think?
I would agree pretty much with all of that. I think the Coburn's performances in the last few weeks have been better than when he first came into the side. He looks certainly more comfortable, more at home, just better physically up against defenders. I think, and I think a lot of that is just from feeling comfortable at this level now, that he knows he can do it, and he's prepared to kind of put himself about a bit more and be a bit more aggressive and take risks and get shots away that maybe he wouldn't when he was first coming into the team and feeling his way in a bit. So I think he's definitely improved. I don't think he looks out of place at Championship level at all. But I also agree with you that I think Boro will be looking at Premier League loans as a real opportunity in January to make the kind of difference that they made last time with Archer and Ramsey coming in. Now, again, like you, they hit the jackpot a bit with Cameron Archer, didn't they? Which we've seen. You know, he's moved to Sheffield United. He's starting to look comfortable in the Premier League now. So to get a player of that level will be very, very difficult. But I think in January, there'll be Premier League loan options who at the very least will offer a different option and supplement Coburn and Latterlath for the second half of the season. And as you rightly say, give Boro a bit of protection against injuries. Because at the moment, like you say, you know, if one of the forwards gets injured, then you're probably looking at Crooks having to be your backup centre forward force if Boro can ever get him fit. Greenwood maybe having to play through there. Either way, it's feeling much more like square pegs in round holes, isn't it? So I think that will be the priority. But yeah, I have been impressed with Coburn in these last few weeks. He's definitely looking more at home now.
And I think just one more thing on Coburn. He missed all of pre-season, really, because he got that knee injury in Portugal, didn't he? And didn't play any part. And at the summer, he talked about how frustrating that was, really, because at the time when Boro were clearly making a decision on his future, Coburn will have felt like he didn't really have a chance to stake his claim and to show why he felt he should stay. So I think, given that he missed the bulk of pre-season and given that this is his first season in the Championship, it's inevitable that he'll get better and better as the season goes on, with more games, with more goals, with more experience, with more belief. I think Coburn will continue to grow into the role. So I think there's promise there, and you know, it goes without saying. This time last week we were discussing the team for Plymouth, and who was going to play up front was one of 2 or 3 question marks. I think it goes without saying now, after that performance last week, that he keeps his place for Leicester on Saturday, doesn't it?
So starting to look ahead to Leicester a little bit, Michael Carrick's press conference. I mean, these injuries, how worried should we be about the fact that, you know, McGree, Lenihan, Force, you know, it felt like a month ago they were a couple of weeks away from potentially being ready. We're now in the game before the international break. They're not going to be ready. It doesn't sound from what Michael Carrick's been saying that it's absolutely cast iron guaranteed that they'll be ready come the end of the international break, which it is starting to get a bit of a worry, isn't it? The you know, players who are big players in the squad, and it didn't feel at the time like they'd offered real long term. You know, we know Tommy Smith is potentially not going to kick another ball this season. You know, Boro have just had to get their head around that quickly. It didn't feel like that for these 3. And I'm not saying that they're going to be out for the rest of the season, but they're already been out for longer than we probably thought at first. Yeah,
it's I think because of the way Carrick operates, when he's speaking to the press, he never wants to give much away on injuries, really, anyway, does he? So I think that makes it difficult to determine how long they're going to be out for. And I think the nature of the injuries in this case. So, with Smith, for example, with Lewis O'Brien, they're both clearly injuries, you know, was it fracture of the tibia, was it? Fibula with O'Brien, thinking back. Smith was the Achilles. You know, they're both long-term injuries. There's no getting away from that. We've talked about McGree's plantar fascia issue in recent weeks, haven't we? And Lenihan and Force both seem to be those kind of niggling injuries where you're assessing day to day, really, week to week, rather than saying like, right, 3 weeks down the line, 4 weeks down the line, we're going to step him back up. So I think it's difficult to know. What Carrick said today was that they're not ready to return, and really they're no closer at this stage to being ready to return. So I like you said there, I think reading into that, at the minute, just going on what we know, there's no suggestion that they're going to be ready to return, because there's no suggestion that they're back in training at this stage, never mind that they're going to be ready to, you know, I think Force has missed 3 games. Lenihan hasn't played since the Southampton game, I don't think, hasn't started since the Southampton game, although I think there was 2 separate injuries there, and McGree's missed the last 5 now. You know, Boro have coped well, haven't they? Relatively well.
I was just going to say that. It's to Boro's credit, really, that they have, isn't it? That you know, 3 big players. I mean, you know, defensively, Fry and McNair have looked pretty good. Greenwood's obviously come in and to take that midfield slot where McGree would have played and has been great, arguably Boro's best player in the last 3 or 4 matches. And then obviously Isaiah Jones has been doing his stuff, so Force hasn't been particularly missed. The worry, I guess, would be that if you get another couple of injuries in similar kind of positions, and then these players are not around either for a long period, that becomes more problematic, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think Force in particular is a frustrating one for all concerned because he feels like his season hasn't really started yet, doesn't it?
Yeah, at all, yeah.
And he was a big player last season, wasn't he? Even after the signing of Ramsey in January, he felt like, we've talked a lot, haven't we, about the kind of players who managers feel like they can hang the hat on. And Force has felt like one of those for Carrick, hasn't he? One of his kind of dependables in the big game. So to really not have him available has been frustrating. Really, it's a good job that Jones has shown signs of getting back to being the player we know he can be. Although I thought he was poor at Plymouth last week, and the challenge with Jones is still consistency, clearly, isn't it?
Consistent. Yeah. So in terms of the Boro team, which we generally like to chat about before the game, I mean, it feels like at the moment the team that's running along the bottom is Carrick's go-to team, with the possible Vandenberg, Dijksteel at right back is maybe a decision. Leicester in midfield, interchanging with Howson and Hackney is always a kind of discussion point. But then, as you said earlier, it feels like Coburn ahead of Latterlath in attack. It feels like it's a pretty settled lineup with maybe Vandenberg and Dijksteel the only big decision.
Yeah, I thought Vandenberg looked slightly uncomfortable. I thought at Plymouth last week he looked like a centre-half playing at right back. A couple of occasions where he got sucked inside. I still suspect he'll stay in the team on Saturday. I think the selection at Plymouth last week was interesting because this was on the back of a league defeat, a pretty deflating, really, and flat league defeat at home at Stoke, and a decent cup win at Exeter when fringe players had come in and taken the chance. But it was an opportunity. Yeah, Rodgers. So for Carrick to revert back to what feels like his league team, I thought was pretty telling, really. Like you said there, that's his team, isn't it? And there might be 2 or 3 changes to that on Saturday. But whereas at the start of the season we were bouncing around really with no idea as to how the team was going to look. Now, if we're wrong there, then we're likely to only be out by 1 or 2 players, aren't we?
And it feels kind of much less likely that there'll be the changes because A, obviously there hasn't been a midweek game, and B, we're then heading into the international break. So this doesn't feel like a game where you've got to juggle it with other games around it, if you know what I mean. It feels like Carrick can pick pretty much whatever team he wants for this game, not having to worry about workload on players. And so hence, what is his team, you would imagine, is going to be the side that lines up. Yeah,
it feels like a kind of, as daft it sounds like, a game in itself, doesn't it? A week build-up, 2 weeks afterwards, like the championship's top team coming. It feels like there's been a build-up to a big game, and it feels like an event. You were at Leicester Sunderland last month. What were Leicester like? What were Leicester like then? What can Boro expect?
I thought they deserved to win, but I also thought that Sunderland played pretty well for long periods of games. Leicester scored early through James Justin, 10 minutes, 12 minutes or something, and pretty dominant in the first 15 or 20 minutes. And you thought, okay, they could blow Sunderland away. If they get a second goal, Sunderland could be banging trouble. And maybe if they had got a second goal, they would have been. But then the second half was a real 50-50 game. Sunderland had 2 or 3 good. Abdullah Bar missed a really good chance towards the end, and the game was in the balance all the way through. So I didn't come away thinking, wow, Leicester are so much better than any other team in the Championship. I didn't feel like that. They're clearly very, very strong. What I thought was interesting, I've just get it up here actually. So that day, Leicester's bench, so forget their starting 11, Leicester's bench had Conor Cody, England international, Harry Souttar, Scotland international, Mark Albrighton, Premier League winner, Hamza Chowdhury, a couple of years ago, every Premier League team in the league, including Newcastle, seem to want to sign him on loan. Jamie Vardy, England international, etc. Patson Daka, £25 million striker. That's their bench. So, I mean, their squad is stupidly strong for the Championship. I don't think you can get around that. And if they don't go up, something will have gone really badly wrong, because they've made a great start. They've got momentum. They've got cover in every area on the pitch. They can pretty much put out two teams that will be really competitive at the top end of the Championship. So it's a massive ask for Boro. But on the game that I saw them, admittedly, one game, while they were good, they didn't feel like a side who were just going to blow Championship teams away without having to really work for it, if that makes any kind of sense.
And perhaps clutching at straws slightly, but on the back of that, the edge past Sunderland and in a game that they might not have won, they scored late to beat a desperately out of sorts QPR team who sacked the manager after it, and then they lost at home to Leeds last time out. So, so for all they're clearly running away with it, and I don't think you'll find anyone who says that Leicester aren't going to win the title. They're not steamroller in every team they play, are they?
No, they're not. They're absolutely not. Some generally teams that win the Championship, they will have a 2-month spell where they just look unbeatable. They're brushing. You think of the Newcastle team that won the league. You think of Burnley last year. They went on runs where for 2 months they were just turning up, and it looked pretty much impossible to see. Now, Leicester might do that in the second half of the season. They are more than good enough to have that run. As you've alluded to there, they're not in that run at the minute. They're not in the kind of form that makes them unbeatable in any stretch of the imagination. So I think Boro will have a chance. That said, Iheanacho, Vardy, Daka, if they start with two of those three up front, you've got Justin at fullback. You've got Face at centre half, potentially Cody coming in. Like I say, he couldn't even get in the team. Albrighton's there, Winks and Dewsbury Hall midfield, who pretty much any Championship team would have signed in the summer. They're still a really good team. So Boro are going to have to be on their absolute mettle if they're going to win this on Saturday. I think we both agree they're going to have to play better than they did it. They can't make the kind of mistakes that they made there to let Plymouth back into the game. But they've got a chance, definitely.
I think just looking at the table there, I do think there's a case to be made for Boro looking better against the better teams or playing better against the better teams. So if you look at the bottom of the table, Sheffield Wednesday, Boro drew. QPR, Boro lost. Somehow at home. Coventry, Boro lost. Plymouth, Boro only drew. Then if you go at the top, admittedly, Boro haven't played any of the top three yet, but they beat Southampton, they beat Cardiff, who were 7th, they beat Sunderland, who were 8th, and they beat them all well, really. I think clearly Saturday's game is the biggest test Boro have faced so far this season. But Boro have stacked up pretty well against the teams that you'd expect to be up there in the mix so far this season. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And I think in some ways that kind of ding-dong battle probably suits Boro, doesn't it? House and Hackney, those type of players, Fry, McNair at the back, they'll relish this kind of challenge, because this is the kind of challenge they've kind of, had sporadically throughout their Boro career, when Boro have been the team right up there challenging. And, you think back to obviously the playoff games didn't really go to plan, but those big games towards the end of both of the last 2 seasons, really, that they've kind of had to win, and they've found a way to do that. I certainly don't think they'll be fazed by taking on Leicester at the weekend, and they know what's coming, don't they? They know that Leicester under Maresca are possession based. They'll look to keep the ball. Boro are going to have to be really well organised. They're going to have to get their press right. They're not necessarily going to dominate possession. It's not going to be one of those Riverside games where Boro have a load of the ball and are asked to break a team down who just want to do nothing but sit deep. And Boro can often struggle in those kind of games. This isn't going to be like that. This is going to be 2 good teams going at it. And like you said, I think that probably does suit Boro better than
playing against in inverted commas, Leicester team who just have a really low drop, sit off the ball, let Boro dominate possession and say, right, we're just going to sit in, come and try and break us down, and we'll just look to spring on you when you can. That's often the games when I think Boro struggle more than when it's a give as good as you get game against a decent team.
I think you mentioned Maresca there. I think he deserves immense credit really for the way they've started, because for all you look at that squad and think that anyone could be in charge and take them back up to the Premier League at the first time of asking. But how many times have we seen championship clubs come down with squads where you think they are just going to absolutely run away with this, and they've completely struggled? I mean, that Stoke team that came down a few years ago, and the team that they built in the first season back up, Boro in the Gary Monk season to a certain extent. There are countless examples, aren't there? I think there's examples every year of teams who find it hard to get out of that losing mentality when you've been getting beat every week in the Premier League and suddenly turning into a winning machine again. But it's been pretty seamless there, isn't it? The turnaround under
it has, and I mean,
it appeared a bit of a gamble of an appointment, really.
Yeah, while we've gone through the squad list there, and there's an awful lot of good players in it, in fairness, they have lost a lot of good players as well. There was a lot of big players left in the immediate aftermath of relegation. And so there has been a bit of a rebuilding job to do. Now, admittedly, A, he has kept a lot of good players, and B, he's been able to spend money on the likes of Harry Winks that, other championship clubs just couldn't get near that kind of a wage. So the parachute payments will have helped with that. But he's come in, he's clearly from the kind of Guardiola school. He knows what kind of a possession-based game he wants to play. There have been definite signs of that so far with Leicester. So, I think whatever happens on Saturday, it'll be an attractive game to watch, because Leicester will come and try and play football. And we know that Boro clearly play football under Carrick. So I think in that respect, it'll be a good game between two attractive teams. And obviously, you mentioned the managers there. You've got the two of them have had a great month and hence have been nominated for Manager of the Month. They're both up for it, aren't they?
Yeah. No surprise there, really. Or with Russell Martin or Kieran McKenna, because they've all done. They all had great months. I think the two different ones, aren't they? Maresca and McKenna have just built on their impressive starts. Carrick and Martin both helped recover, because there was a stage where Martin, even though it was very early and even though Southampton worked very hard to get him out of that Swansea contract, you wondered how long he was going to last, didn't you? Because the fans...
Well, they looked in a rut when they lost to Boro. They looked like a side who...
And the fans weren't having it,
No, they took the lead in that game, and then they just looked like a side who didn't really know how to win, and Boro did really well to get back into it, don't get me wrong. But there was definitely an element of Southampton letting Boro back into that game. And at that time, you thought, I'm not sure. But no, he has turned it round. You look at the four teams there that you've mentioned, Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich, Boro. There's got to be a good chance that that's four of your top six come the end of the season. If all goes to plan, I would have thought. Yeah,
I mean, Boro would be not the outside shot, but I think the other three.
The less nailed on one. I would agree with that.
It does feel, and Tony Mowbray, I've been to his press conference on Thursday, and Mowbray was saying that Leicester look like they're away and gone. It does feel like Leicester are going up. Can Ipswich continue the form that they've enjoyed so far this season? Leeds are finding the feet and hitting form now, and then it feels like a group of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 teams, doesn't it, competing for probably the three other places.
What's your thoughts for the weekend then? What are you thinking?
I think score draw. I think it'll be a good game, a ding dong, like you said. I do think there's a as we talked about, I think Boro look better against the better teams. I think it feels like a bit of I don't know why it feels like that, but just like a big game, an occasion. I think it's because there's been a week build-up, because it's the last game before the break. I think a draw, 1-1. And although that'd be 3 games without a win in the league, I think a home draw against Leicester, you'd carry a bit of momentum. You'd carry a bit of... I don't think there'd be a deflating feeling at all going into the Astronaut, unless you were to lead 1-0 and concede late on and have to kind of settle for a point rather than. But I think a draw. I mean, I know they got beat last time out. I know they only just squeezed past QPR. I think a draw would be a brilliant result. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I think I struggle to see Boro winning it. I hope I'm wrong. I struggle to see Leicester losing. But I can definitely see it being pretty tight, and I could see a draw as well. 1-1, 2-2 maybe, but I don't think it'll be that open. So I'll go 1-1.
The fence-sitting experts.
Fence-sitting, yeah, exactly. It feels a bit like that, but
I agree.
I think Boro have more than enough to get something out of it. But I haven't watched Leicester and seen the strength of that squad. Yeah, I think a draw is probably more likely than a Boro win.
Were you at Leicester on? Because just before we wrap up, in the last 15 minutes of that game at Plymouth last week, I thought if this torrential downpour had started 10 minutes earlier, there's every chance this game might not have finished because the pitch was brutal. Were you at that Leicester game that was on Sky?
In the snow.
Yeah. And should not.
Monday night, was that?
Yeah, it was a night.
I think
game.
It was a Monday night.
It was definitely a night.
So I was there, and it was that is the worst travel, certainly to a football match, but I think probably to and from that I've ever had. It was heading down the M1, and it was snowing, and the M1 was down to maybe 2 lanes, maybe 1. And then you anyone who's been to Leicester away will know that you come off the M1 and you're basically about 3 miles from there into the King Power. Largely just up one road with a few roundabouts and then a bit of fiddling around once you skirt around the edge of kind of Leicester city centre. But it took me 2 hours from leaving the M1 to not even getting to somewhere where I could abandon my car on the side of a road, safely knowing that A, I could find it, B, it wasn't going to be snowed in, and C, I could get to the ground. And I think I got to the ground about half an hour before kickoff. Stage, I'm constantly messaging kind of the press officer saying, look, is this game going to be on? And they're like, no, it's on, it's going to be on. And it just seemed inconceivable that it was going to be on. Even walking to the ground, it seemed inconceivable. You got in the ground and it felt, but as we know, the game took place. Clearly a Sky influenced decision, surely. Had that game not been on Sky, it wouldn't have been played. And it was played, I mean, the crowd, I don't know what the crowd was, but it felt like it was about half of what it would have been because fans had either not been able to get there or had decided, no, I'm just going to stay at home and watch it on the telly. It felt like it was played in front of half a stadium. It was a horrible. And then, of course, the worst thing is you're then leaving the ground at 11 o'clock at night thinking, oh, my goodness, what's the M1? And the M1 was 1 lane pretty much. Home. In fairness, there was snowplows going through, so it was kept clear, but you could only just get home. Yeah.
I know we said it on several occasions last week, but props to those fans who made the trip to Exeter and Plymouth because that was a packed out away end at Plymouth. And Carrick was absolutely purring about them again, as he did in the 2 weeks previous, because obviously there was Norwich as well the week before that. Hopefully the fans get a win to celebrate against Leicester on Saturday. We'll be back next week looking back on the Leicester game. We'll obviously keep going during the international break, and we'll hopefully have a couple of special guests lined up as well. So thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, leave any comments. Enjoy your weekend. And if you're at the game on Saturday, hopefully you'll be celebrating a Boro win.